There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is a middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is a dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone. Hey guys, Alf here, back with another Analyzing the Twilight Zone. We're still on Season 1, and we're up to Episode 10, directed by John Bram, and written by Rod Serling. So, this episode's a pretty simple one. It's a simple comeuppance story, but, related to, Nazis. So, Rod Serling himself was Jewish. He also fought in World War II, so this is pretty relevant to him, and I'm guessing that's why he wrote this story. But let's get into it. So the story starts with a man waking up on the deck of a British cargo liner. It's crossing the Atlantic in 1942. It's going from Liverpool to New York City, and the guy's name is Carl Lancer. He's a bit lost. He's I think all he knows is that his name's Carl Lancer. He's got a case of amnesia. He doesn't understand how he got on the boat. He doesn't remember. He doesn't know what he's doing there. And he keeps staring out into this thick fog that's surrounding the boat. When he gets called to dinner, so he goes into the dining cabin. He joins the crew and the passengers. They ask him to come in. One guy asks him to come sit with them. And they're like, "Hey, Carl Lancer." Yeah, he's like, "I saw your name on the manifold. And I was trying to, I have this fun game where I try to picture what people look like. And I blah, blah." They ask him all these questions about him. He doesn't have the answers. He seems to have forgotten things. He has amnesia. But they start talking about German U-boats in the area and, being nervous that, they might get attacked. But he has all this knowledge of German boats and says, you don't have to be worried about this, be more worried about submarines. And they think that they shouldn't be worried about submarines. You can't see them coming, and they're scared of that. But they're like, oh, no. Carl Lancer's like, oh, no, they'll come up to the surface before they attack and this and that. They'll find it kind of odd that he knows so much about it. And the one guy, even the captain, tells him, like, "Oh, you sound a lot like a U-boat commander." Right? This kind of startles Lancer, and he drops his cup, and he spills coffee all over himself. Eventually, he starts remembering more. They start asking him where he's from, and he says he was born in Frankfurt, Germany. And then he says he doesn't feel well and walks out. Then he talks to a female passenger who he met during dinner, and he explains to her how he doesn't have any idea of how he got there. He's got all this amnesia. He's not remembering. He only remembers bits and pieces. And he starts getting more irritated and starts saying that, there's impending doom. There's something coming that's, he can't shake this feeling that something bad is going to happen. Later on, the captain calls for him to come see him and bring his passport, because he tells him he finds it, he's kind of suspicious due to him being German and saying he was born in Frankfurt, Germany. So he's like, oh, there's something going on here. Let's check him out. But when he comes, he tells him, he doesn't have his passport and he can't provide any details about his past. He keeps questioning him and he's like, "I'm sorry, I just don't remember." So I tell him, "All right, go back to your cabin and keep looking for your passport. We'll send somebody to check you out later." So when he gets there, a steward is sent there, and the steward is helping him put away his stuff and unpack, and he sees a German naval officer's cap. And he's like, "Oh, was this like a war trophy?" He thinks, maybe this guy was in the war on the Allied side, and says, "Oh, is this a war trophy?" And, the guy's like, "Oh, give me that." And Lancer looks at it, looks inside, and he sees his name in it. So, now he's kind of disturbed. He walks out. So, eventually we find out on the bridge that the captain and the first officer are talking about that there's a problem with the ship's engines, and they need to stop the engines, basically to repair them. But if they stop the engines, they'll be dead in the water, and if there's any U-boats lurking around, it'll give away their position. But in the end, they have to stop, Lancer's drinking in the bar, and he tells the bartender, like, "Man, those engines don't sound right. They sound like they're working too hard." And around 12:05, the ship stops. He realizes it, and when he looks at the time, he's like, 12:05. And it comes to a moment, he comes to realize that they'll all die around 1:15.
12. 1:15.
Beg pardon, sir?
1:15. Something is going to happen at 1:15.
The memory comes in and he's like, oh my god, there's a ship that's going to attack us. And we're going to die at 1:15. So he tries to convince the crew of danger, but he can't. He runs around desperately trying to persuade passengers to abandon the ship, get on lifeboats, and get the fuck out. But when he does, all he finds is corridors. All the corridors and cabins are empty. At one point, he turns around and he sees the whole crew standing there, and he's like yelling at them, but then they disappear. They're not there. And then he goes out to the deck, and he looks out into the water, and he sees a U-boat surface. He looks over, and he has binoculars, and he sees himself on the ship, looking with binoculars at the ship that he's on, with his whole uniform and the cap and everything. And that's when he realizes he is the commander of the other boat that attacked this boat. And basically he's suffering hell by repeating the situation from the other person's point of view. So the whole story has him, basically this is his hell, his comeuppance for being so merciless and killing people, because this boat wasn't a war boat. It was just transporting passengers. They didn't have weapons. They weren't looking to attack anybody. They were just trying to go from Liverpool to New York. And, Captain Lancer said, who cares? Let's kill them. It doesn't matter if they can attack back. It doesn't matter that it's filled with women and children. This is war, right? And then, after seeing the boat sink and stuff like that, we go into the perspective of the other Colonel Lancer, the one in the U-boat. And he's in his cabin, documenting the night's kill. And the second in command, Lieutenant Mueller, comes in. And he looks down, and the guy's like, oh, what's wrong? And he's like, it makes me wonder, we attacked these people, that had women and children. They weren't ready for an attack. We didn't give them any warning. They didn't really have many weapons and stuff. We just killed them without mercy. And he wonders, if they're damned in the eyes of God. And, Lansing is skeptic, and he's like, there is no God. There's no such thing as hell or anything. This is war. This is what we do. But in the end, we know, we see the other ship sinking, and we see that it repeats again. It starts from the beginning again. He finds himself on the deck again, not knowing where he is, and he's basically, like I said before, this is his hell. He had no remorse for attacking a ship full of women and children that were defenseless without warning.
I mean, sir, in the eyes of God.
Oh, you're not only a fool, Lieutenant, but also a religious fool, and perhaps a mystic at that. Suppose we are damned, what will happen then?
As the other guy told him, so the other guy, I'm guessing, didn't, his second in command, didn't suffer the same fate of having a repetitive hell from the other point of view, because he understood and had felt remorse for it, didn't like that happened, so he was living right. Captain Lancer was an evil person and did not care, did not have humanity. He was just a person, kill, 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 and that's all he cared about. So he's the one suffering the repetitive hell over and over again. And I guess his lack of God, I don't know if this was Rod Serling's way of saying, atheists suffer hell, maybe not. I don't really know if Rod Serling was atheist or not, probably not, but I don't know. Let's see what some trivia has to say about this. Oh, this was an episode where, because of a sponsor, Rod Serling had to change things in the story, because it was sponsored by Sanka, an instant coffee company. And the ship was a British ship. Obviously, in the story, it was written that in the British ship, they would have tea time and they would drink tea. But they couldn't have that. The sponsors didn't like it. They wanted them to drink coffee. So it made no sense, but they had to change it. It makes total sense that a British Navy would have pots of tea for tea time, but instead they had to have coffee, so he changed it. No, so instead of tea, I think they had coffee, but in the script they just changed it to ask for a tray to be sent up to the bridge, as opposed to saying, bring some tea up to the bridge, which he originally had. And I'll show you a clip of him talking about it. It's a very famous interview. I think I used it in one of the Analyzing Twilight Zone videos before. So here it is.
We changed, in 18 scripts, Mike, we have had one line changed, which, again, was a little ludicrous, but of insufficient basic concern within the context of the story, not to put up a fight. On the bridge of a British ship, a sailor calls down to the galley and asks, in my script, for a pot of tea, because I believe that it's constitutionally acceptable in the British Navy to drink tea.
Yeah.
One of my sponsors happens to sell instant coffee, and he took great umbrage, or at least minor umbrage anyway,
Yeah.
with the idea of saying tea. Well, we had a couple of swings back and forth, nothing serious, and we decided we'd ask for a tray to be sent up to the bridge. But in 18 scripts, that's the only conflict we've had.
So, to finish this off, to give kind of what the meaning is, I think I kind of explained it during the story, but I mean, I'll do it one more time. But it's kind of justice, I guess, comeuppance. It's easy. It's a very simple one. This man was a killer with no remorse, so as his comeuppance in the afterlife, he is doomed to repeat the event over and over again from the victim point of view. So, you know, he's killing himself over and over again. He's constantly suffering this and will forever. This is not something new. Lots of people use this idea of hell being repetition. And Stephen King and Danse Macabre had used this idea where he says in it, if you read Danse Macabre, is a nonfiction story written by Stephen King about horror. And he says something to the extent that hell is repetition, and he's used that a lot in his stories. Other horror writers have used that in their stories, or other writers in general use hell being repetition as a story, as a device. It makes sense, right? It's hellish to have to repeat these things over and over again, especially something that's really bad or traumatic in your life, and it's total comeuppance for somebody to experience the things they are doing to other people, especially when it's horrific things. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, the story is pretty simple. It's a good one, though. I definitely recommend that people watch this. And, yeah, that's definitely relevant with World War II and what the Nazis did to the Jews, or just in war in general. You know, it doesn't even have to be World War II. It could just be war in general, and the idea that people, because of war, see other people as collateral damage, don't care. You know, this was a ship that they didn't have to attack. It wasn't a warship. It was just transporting people. So, you know, but this is the stuff that happens in war, and this is the stuff soldiers are trained to do. Just kill, kill, kill. And, yeah, it's a relevant story. It makes a lot of sense. It will always be relevant, I think. It doesn't go out of time. So, thanks for watching. The next episode will be And When the Sky Opened Up. Oh, When the Sky Opened. Sorry, there's no up in it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll see you next time.